Amy Collins,
Hey,
good to have you here.
thanks for having me, Dan Fisk.
How long have you been at Universal? How long were you at Universal?
I was at Universal for just over 4.5 years.
So during that time, I tried to arrange a meeting with you once, and it was only until you left that I've now seen you twice in a week.
Is this actually the roast of Amy Collins?
It was a question. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to know how that happened.
I think I was just in my little Universal bubble for a
Okay.
while, just floating around. And now I'm freelance. I've got time to have coffees with you and Leon.
Do podcasts.
And do podcasts.
Amazing.
And have a chat.
All right, so listen, what we're going to do, you know the basic structure, but what I want to talk about to begin with is when it comes to music, prior to your career, your background, how did you get into music? What music kind of gave you that love and the passion for it? And I guess ultimately what then led to a career in it?
I think a lot of this comes down to having a dad that would probably love my job, that has a drum kit in his lounge and is through and through just so passionate about music. So definitely grew up with a lot of music and a lot of different genres around the household. Studied it in school, not sort of business-wise, but just from a musical standpoint. But mainly as I got older, dancing and doing a lot of dance training and enjoying the music around that. And I think that's where my passion really came through. And I think like most people that end up in the music industry, I was that person that was like, have you heard of this artist? Have you heard of this? I was making CDs, I was doing compilations, I was hitting the play on the tape recorder when the top 40 came on.
Okay,
I was that girl. So I always loved it. And I think it was always going to be something in the arts, whether it was dancing or music. And then I've just managed to blend them and enjoy myself now.
Let's stay with dance as the art of dance. Where
Shall
did that
we?
come from?
Definitely not my mum, because she was way more excited when I was playing hockey and football.
Okay.
I had a really good group of friends, and I had a mentor that was my dance teacher from the age of 3 until 18, 19.
You started dancing at the age of 3?
Yeah, ballet.
Wow.
And then I carried on all the way through ballet, tap, hip-hop, jazz, modern, contemporary. It's what I studied. And everything was revolved around the music. And I think my love of like R&B and hip-hop is probably a massive factor in it as well. And dance music too. I like a beat, Dan Fisk. I like a beat.
I'm with you. Okay, and so you're saying basically that your dad seems like he was primarily responsible for the passion, injecting that passion.
100%. Now I'm freelance. He is constantly asking for me for a job, which is really awkward. He is retired and he lives in Newquay, but he would love it.
And so, was there when you were young? Was there a particular artist, you said R&B and hip hop, but was there a particular artist that you kind of latched onto that developed that passion?
How do I say this without being basic? I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, and my dad used to take me as a treat every 2 years to a concert. So when I was 9, he took me to like the Spice Girls.
Amazing.
I told everyone that Mel C winked at me. She actually winked at the camera, but for some reason I thought she was looking at me. So I loved live music.
Yeah.
I loved pop.
Yeah.
But I loved a lot of like 2000s hip hop. I was big on like 50 Cent and Ludacris and
Right.
White Girl in Somerset, Living the Dream. So there wasn't one artist. I was always quite eclectic in everything I loved.
Am I allowed to ask the year that you were born?
Yeah, sure. I am telling everyone I'm 28, but I'm not. I'm 34. I was born in 89.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right, fine. Okay, so I get the Spice Girls. Okay, you must have been a fanatic, right?
Yeah, loved it. Spice
Okay.
Girls t-shirts. And, it was 5 women being inherently themselves, or that's what they marketed to us and did a very good job of it. And no one had ever seen anything like that. And you don't really digest that as a, young child. But I think we've done a lot of research of, when you start listening to music up to the age of 6 and everything's kind of fed to you by your parents, and it's from the age of 7 that you start like that early really thinking about what your taste is. And I was in the Spice Girls, Christina, Britney, Sierra, Brandy, I was in that era, Beyonce, Destiny's Child, we can't forget about. So I was witnessing and digesting like music from amazing women, and I think that was a big part, alongside obviously Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and very American stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. I mean, it was absolutely popping off at the time, wasn't it?
It was huge.
Excuse the pun.
Yeah.
Okay, so how did that then start to become something that you felt like I want to do this as a job? Not probably, I guess, for a lot of people and other people we've spoken to this podcast, they're not actually knowing what the jobs were in the music industry.
Oh, that's such a good point. I remember going to the career officer at my school in Frome, Somerset. Shout out Frome, UKF, home of drum and bass. I told her, about dancing and about music, and it was all, well, you could be a dance teacher or you could be a music teacher. And it was all kind of either, teachers or, really amazing jobs, but I didn't know what, we'll go into it a bit, but plugger was or a marketeer was or anything like that. And then I moved to London and I had a friend from school that was working in music PR, and she told me about her job. And I was like, is that a joke? That's not a real job. And I then started doing my own research, and I didn't have any friends that were outside of her that were doing anything in labels or big companies. I just kind of knew that she was working in music PR for this independent company. I can't remember the name. And I thought I could do that. I love chatting to people.
Yeah.
I love music. I love artists. I love new artists and finding them before everyone else. Yeah. How do I get into this? And I went on a website that was just musicjobs.com or something like that. And then I just applied for months on end. I was working at a bar in Bank, Moorgate. It was dreadful. So sad. But I was doing that and just applying for jobs, not getting anywhere because I had, no experience. I didn't have a music business degree. I didn't have a friend that could get me into a job. But I just carried on and eventually got an internship at a company called Lander PR, which was tiny. There was like 3 of us. And that was my first in, really.
So, Lander PR.
Yeah.
How long were you there?
A good question. I think I was there for about 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I was there for about 3 years. So that was a radio and TV promotions company.
Which then led to Your Army, right?
It did.
So, and I guess when it comes to promotions in the music industry, when you say was Lander PR is kind of one thing, or is that similar to Your Army?
Similar to Your Army,
so
but
both PR?
Yeah. But I think when we refer to PR in the music industry, we're thinking print press, online
I guess
press.
there's a grey area.
Yeah.
PR.
Yeah.
Music promotion.
Yeah.
What's the difference? What's both? Explain.
I think in the industry, when we refer to PR, we determine it as people that are publicists. So they're the individuals that will take the artist to digital platforms, be it like a Pitchfork or a Dazed or, UK GRMs, and, anything like that. And then promotions companies, even though you're right, they are all encompassing. Promotions company often focus more on radio, TV. So pitching their artists to Radio 1, Kiss, Capital, and then TV, pitching your artists for Jules Holland, Graham Norton, MTV, Bauer Network, all of that juicy stuff. That used to be very, very important when I came into the industry. That was how you started breaking ice, particularly at the radio.
Okay, and now?
Well, it's shifted because when I first started working with major labels and we'd have big planning meetings where they'd set an agenda and they'd say, okay, we're going to start talking about the artist, what's important to them, what we want to get from this project, what are our objectives, and radio would be the first thing on the agenda, and then you'd sort of go through the rest in kind of order of what you thought was important. And then streaming took over a little bit and started going towards the top. So we're talking, what our plans were at Spotify, Apple, all the DSP platforms. And now we call it audience, which is digital. Audience has kind of snuck to the top for the most part, where the strategy of what's happening, social media, what we're doing for third party on, TikTok, Reels, Snapchat, all of that is now slowly, shifting its way to the top. But really, you want to empower all of your departments to feel like they're the most important. So you also have to kind of navigate that accordingly.
I guess it sounds like what you're saying, whatever area it is, it's all based on attention, right?
100%.
Yeah. Okay. And so when did you start at Your Army? Do you remember? I've got a date here, but I don't know if it's a September 2018, but it might be wrong.
That's definitely wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, it would have, I think it was in either 2012 or 2013.
Oh, okay. Yeah, this is when you became the head of, but we'll get to that. Okay, so when you're kind of foot in the door with Your Army, what was how did you start there?
So I was and still am helping out a promoter company called Musicalize. So that's more in the live space. And I met the owner of the company, Ben Anderson, on Twitter in like 2012, and I started doing show running for them. And they did some of the first shows for like Ed Sheeran and Stormzy. I think the first one that I did was Professor Green, and that's just, you know, getting people bottles of water, making sure that everyone's rider is there, making sure that artists are there on time. But it's a really good way to cut your teeth. And then I started stage managing. Occasionally I do be a show caller, which I did last night. And during that period, they were having some quite big American artists come over, including Brandy. And I, on the side, alongside what I was doing at Landa, would take those artists into One Extra for interviews or Radio 1. So I went into One Extra with Brandy. It's so difficult for me not to sing a Brandy song right now, but I can hear
Which
myself
one?
in my ears. Obviously, The Boy Is Mine.
Okay.
You know, classic. And at that point, Sam Smith was just coming through. So Christian Knockel, who runs Your Army along with James Pitt, he was in the studio with Sam, and Sam was doing, I think it was a Hugh Stevens interview or session, and Sam was a massive Brandy fan. So they came over, wanted to connect with Brandy, they're having a lovely little chat, and I start talking to Christian, asking him what he does, and he talks about Your Army, and he's reeling off the, you know, Disclosures and the Screams and the London Grammars, and I'm there with my mouth open thinking these are all artists that I love. And I was doing very heritage catalogue stuff at Landa, which was fun, and it was a really good way for me to get in, but I really wanted to work music that I loved. And I basically said to him, I'm a radio plugger. Can I have a coffee with you? Can I have a job? I think it was literally in that order. He gave me his email, and I'd have to go and look through all my Hotmail emails because that's how long ago it was. For me to actually break through with him, probably about 6 months. And I think he was looking for someone quite experienced. And our friend Jazz was working there at the time as well.
Oh, shout out to Jazz.
Shout out Jazz. And I think eventually he just got really sick of me asking for a job. So he
caved.
He caved.
Yeah.
He caved.
Okay. But I think you touched on a good point, and we did talk about it earlier. The importance of when you're trying to get into any job, that sending that first email to whoever it is, and then following up with that email, and then following up again, and keep following it. Basically, I don't want to use the term hassling, but you've got to sort of make yourself, like you said there, you made yourself a bit of a nuisance, right? But you have to be able to back that up, and obviously they must have. What did they give you, an interview or an opportunity? What was it?
I had a few interviews with both him and James. I think because my entry point was promotions, you have to be a sort of people person, and you have to enjoy listening to people, loving music, being willing to learn. Mm-hmm. And I was just so hungry for it. And I think they thought, wow, if she can pester us politely enough like this, maybe she can get some radio plays. So I think that's kind of how it worked.
Okay, so then, and how long was your time at Your Army?
Over 7 years. I think.
So you worked your way up through, what was your first role called?
So I was a radio assistant.
Radio assistant.
I was a radio assistant, and then so Jazz basically trained me up.
Brilliant.
Little tag team. We absolutely loved it. And because I had the contacts with Jules Holland and Graham Norton and a lot of TV people, I kind of thought, what's my USP for Your Army?
Yeah.
And it was opening a TV department because they hadn't had one before. And they could support me in doing that, but that was the next step. So I opened the TV department with them, and we worked a lot of campaigns that radio were doing. And we did a lot with Ministry. We did a lot with different major labels. But I worked pretty much all of the Because Music label roster. And the biggest moment that I had was with Christine and the Queens.
Yeah.
And as soon as we got Chris on Later with Jules, and we had this incredible moment of getting a Graham Norton just after they'd got a Glastonbury slot at a good time. And it was all just fortunate timing.
All came together at the right time?
It came together at the right time. The music, the choreography, it was just perfect for TV. Christian and my colleague Martin were working at radio at the time. And from then we just flew at TV because that was the first time in a long time where something had broken via TV. So I carried on doing that alongside certain radio campaigns that I just loved, like a Neo or a Frank Ocean and things like that. And then slowly transferred over to becoming head of promo, where they just gave me a little bit of responsibility. I'm a yes person a lot of the time, Dan. So they're like, do you want to do this? And I'm like, hell yeah. And I really enjoyed it.
Okay. And I guess while we're at your army, because it was a big chunk of the biggest chunk of your career.
So far.
What you've mentioned Christine and the Queens. Were there any other big highlights during your time there?
There was loads. I loved Neo. I loved the first album. That was a real passion project for me. I think witnessing the Frank Ocean turmoil of him dropping an album and then us working the new project and navigating that was super interesting. It was a real moment where you start understanding of kind of the landscape of how it worked. Enjoyed working a lot of the drum and bass stuff, like the Wilkinsons. Those were also passion projects for me. There was so much at Your Army, and I think everything was based on. I was so fortunate that if I didn't like the music, or the artist, or the manager, I didn't have to work it. It was Christian really empowered me, and so did James, to be like, what do you want to do? What kind of music do you want to work? So every single project I worked, I felt like was a really great artist. And there was stuff that didn't, there's artists that we talk about, but there's also stuff that didn't cut through that was, disappointing, but I still put my heart and soul into every single project and I absolutely loved it.
Quality, that is the secret, really, isn't it?
It really is.
In any job. I think then, so when you're at Your Army, at what point did you start to think to yourself, I want to broaden my horizons, I want the next challenge? So,
because we always went into a lot of major labels and independents and we saw how everyone worked, I had this little inkling that I knew that I wanted to be a product manager or work in marketing. I loved that they were steering the ship. I loved that they had the closeness with the artist and the manager. But I never really actioned it because I felt like I was really good at radio and TV and I wanted to drive it. And then someone called Johnny Brocklehurst.
Oh, big up Brockle.
We obviously worked a lot because he had then gone to Ireland. And I've always loved the ethos of Ireland.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Well done.
We're getting there. She's had a coffee. I loved the ethos of Ireland. There was a lot of people there that I really liked. And I loved their roster. And we were in Ibiza for a Radio 1 weekend. And Johnny and I were I'm just going to keep it real. We were in Pikes at about 5 a.m.
Okay.
And he said, what do you think about doing marketing? And I didn't think that I could jump roles because I was already kind of running in promo. And I did think to myself, well, if I start doing marketing, I'm going to have to go in as an assistant or a junior. And I feel like I've got enough tools to not do that. But I know that you have to go through the motions. And Johnny was just like, no, I'll hold your hand. I'll take you. I'll mentor you. I'll run with it. Come with us. So, and it was a while that we were having those conversations, and I felt really loyal to Christian and James at Your Army. So there was a big part of me that didn't want to leave them. But I think because I wasn't jumping to join another promo team, I was going into a completely different role. It was quite a, respectful breakup. So that's kind of how it happened.
Okay, so you moved to the mighty Universal, or at least Island underneath Universal.
The beast, yeah.
Was it as a marketing manager role to begin with, right?
It was.
You mentioned product manager before, right? Just to clear things up, product manager, marketing manager, is there a difference?
So no, and I almost think that the term now is you're a brand manager. You're managing the artist brand.
Okay.
Because the marketing you do drive, especially at Island, lots of labels work differently. Sometimes they have a team that is purely focused on the marketing, advertising side of it, the digital side of it. Everything at Island is quite all-encompassing, which means they really tool you up. So I call it a marketing manager, but I also think that sometimes it's quite confusing. But then if you call it product manager, it's not a product, it's an artist. So I kind of like the term brand manager. I think we should start running with that.
It's very today, I would say.
You're welcome. We're current, baby.
I mean, to be honest, I think about it. In music industry, you do have these roles with similar titles that mean the same thing. Again, I mentioned this, I think, on a few podcasts back, like audience manager, digital manager, digital marketing manager, like they're all the same thing, if not a similar thing, right?
Yeah, people love a title in the music industry.
Yeah, I bet.
I mean, now, because I'm freelance, the term consultant seems to be you're a marketing consultant, or some people call themselves a creative consultant.
Yeah.
So, because it also depends on you as an individual and what you're going to bring to the project. So who knows? Should we just call it marketing, product, project, brand
Do you
manager?
know what? I was just trying to kind of I've always kind of wondered what is the difference, but actually I already knew they're all the same thing. It's just different places call them different things, right?
Yeah.
So back to you at Island, that kind of transition from working in a music promotion company to now a record label. What was the kind of, I guess, that initial, whilst you had all these tools, what was the biggest challenge for you to kind of overcome in the first instance?
I don't know if it was a challenge because I genuinely really enjoy learning. I didn't ever find it overwhelming in terms of what I needed to learn. I think I was just so surprised by the amount of people that you have on the ground that can do one campaign. Because when I was in promo, even though I'd sit in planning meetings and you'd have the audience person there, the international person there, the radio, the TV person there, the streaming person there, there's so much that's just one person that you're talking to, but how it works from, once you're in the label and you can see what everyone else is doing, that was quite overwhelming, but also extraordinary because you sort of, you think, oh, okay, this is why there is value in being an artist here, because what you've got at your dispense is massive. And it was just about slowly learning that. And I think Johnny really helped me because what he didn't do is overwhelm me with the amount of projects that I was doing in terms of whether it was a catalogue artist and we were focusing more on like physical product and D2C. I started quite low level in the campaigns that I was doing and doing development artist projects. I was kind of developing with the artists. And then I got to the point where you're just you're running with it and you have the confidence because you're being broken in gently. And I do have to give Johnny credit for that because I know it doesn't always happen.
He gets a lot of shout outs on this podcast.
Does he?
Ed Pearson, obviously.
Oh, of
he
course.
Shouted it out. I'm trying to get him on. He will come on one day.
He will.
But he's, you know what he's like.
Come on, Johnny.
Can we try and briefly break down the role of the marketing manager role at a major record label? We'll do that first. Then I want to get on some of the artists you look after as well, or looked, both.
We can do that. So I think as a starting point, you're married to your A&R.
Okay.
That you are a team because your A&R is quite often the person that has signed the artist. Occasionally, marketeers will come into pitch meetings, and actually more than often they will, but they might not always be the person that's driving the marketing. I was in a lot of pitch meetings and sometimes I worked the projects and sometimes I didn't. But the A&R is responsible for crafting the music and delivering the music to you. For me and how I worked as a marketeer, once the music was delivered or during the process of it being delivered, then I take the reins. Alongside the A&R, being collaborative in what you're doing from a creative and strategic perspective, but you're the wheel as the marketeer and you're the person that is tasked with driving every single team member. You're in the middle. You've got the artist and manager that are plugging into you. And I personally think it's really, really important to have a good relationship with your artist because you want to hear what they want to create so you can empower them and encourage them to progress, which you also do with the artist manager. You then work with the rest of the team at your record label. Or you could be working with independents. We can get into that. So Your job is to be that communicator with the streaming team, with the commercial team, with the radio team, with the TV team, with the audience team, with the ad spend team, with the international team. You're the glue that brings it all together. And I think having a big awareness and an understanding of each of those departments is really, really important so you can ask the right questions because sometimes you also have to energize teams, but you also have to give them accountability and say, what are we doing in this area of the project? What are we doing about this? So you're the person driving it. Okay.
So within your time at Island, and actually I guess you've mentioned some of the ones you worked on at your army, who were you responsible for? Who was your roster at Island?
So it kind of depends on at what point of when you come in and whether you're working single campaigns or album campaigns. And my role shifted a fair bit over 4.5 years where I started off with a lot of UK projects and then I started doing a little bit of international. One of my favourite ones is I drove the whole campaign with Johnny because he signed the artist, is we worked the streets with Mike Skinner. None of us are getting out of This Life Alive. Every title was so long. waffle. So I did a lot of that. I did the whole of that project. And that was a really interesting one for me where I had a real education in retail and D2C and physical products and what that means. So I worked a lot with the streets. Most recently, Sigrid. Absolutely adore Sigrid. She's amazing. Worked Ben Howard, which is, as a Southwest girl, was a huge one for me as well. Did a lot of dance music because that's what your army are known for. As we said earlier, I do like a beat. So Medusa and James Hype have been my babies for a long time. And they're a massive international weighty artists. So those have been really interesting. And they're ones I'm still working with as well, Medusa and James. So that's great. I'm going to forget loads. And then international, I was the kind of, I guess, liaison point with Republic, which are arguably the biggest and most successful record label in the world. Look at the Billboard charts.
I'm going to say, so let's touch on this briefly because, again, I think it can be confusing. Like, there's Universal and there's UK Ireland, right?
Yeah.
UK Universal Ireland.
Yeah.
Then you've got US Universal Republic.
Yeah.
Republic
yeah.
and Ireland are talking. Why is there, like, let's say, why is there not a Republic in the UK, and why is it? I think there is an Ireland in the US, isn't there?
There is indeed.
Yeah.
So there's. Yeah, it is kind of confusing, but when you're in it for so long, you just don't even question it. So when you ask me, I'm like, yeah, of course, that's how it works. So this is the massive, pro of being an artist signed to Universal is that you have a label in every single territory. With North America being so huge from a music consumption perspective, Universal have sub-labels over there, just like we do here, whether it's a EMI, Polydor, Island, Decca, you name it. Universal have the same in the US, but they're not necessarily titled the same labels. So they have an Interscope. We don't have an Interscope here. They have a Republic. We don't have a Republic here. They have an Island US, which we do a lot of projects. Well, we did a lot of. I need to keep remembering that I don't work at Island anymore. We did a lot of projects with Island US as well, but it just depends on, the relationships between the senior team, the managers that are getting signed by the artist. You, as an artist, will often be signed domestically to a label, which is often where you're from. Not always. Medusa are Italian, but they're domestically signed to the UK. This is where it gets even more complex, I guess. And Republic will have their domestic signings, which are your Taylors, The Weeknd, Drake, Post Malone, all of those massive artists. And then their international team will then communicate with us in the UK and we'll be the international rep. So we won't be involved in a lot of the creative, the inception of the record, knowing, what kind of the video commissioning is, the process is happening with that. We are often delivered a product, not all the time, particularly with developing artists or if they're in market, we do a lot of, we're a big driving force behind it. But my job was to look after our relationship alongside Steve Pitron, who's our SVP, who is the SVP at Island and is an extraordinary, wonderful human being. He is massive in driving that and, what they do with Republic. And I was then tasked with kind of, working certain projects, i.e. your Nicki Minaj's in The Weeknd, and then also just working with the team, the junior marketers or the marketing managers that were doing your Conan Gray's or your Steven Sanchez's, and being part of that kind of, team. In
some big names.
Yeah.
The Weeknd.
I've seen him 3 times this year. That was the only times I could see him. The show is a joke.
Yeah, I went to, where was it? Olympic Stadium?
London Stadium.
London Stadium, yeah, I went to see it. It was great.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, obviously I don't have a direct comms with The Weeknd.
Yeah.
I don't call him up and be like, hey, but what's going down? I wish.
So what about then the difference in, let's take James Hype. Huge dance artist. And then take a development artist that you might be looking after. How does that campaign differ? What do those two campaigns, and obviously there's things between genres and stuff like that, but I want to keep it in terms of the kind of scale of the artist. You've got your kind of breakthrough development and then your kind of global massive artists.
Yeah, I think there are similarities because you're always aiming to do audience building. You're always aiming to build a fan base and engage them and make sure they stay engaged. But for someone like James, who has a very lent-in fan base that are there every single moment when he needs them, be it on Discord or on Instagram or on TikTok, you want to achieve that with a developing artist. And your objectives are different. We might go into a James Hype meeting saying, okay, we want X amount of streams and we want to be charting by this week and by this point, and this is what we're going to do it. With a artist that's developing, that's brand new, that maybe doesn't have, massive social media following, it's about growth. And it's also about, James knows who he is. And I love working with James because he can say yes or no, this is my brand, this is what I do, run with it. When you're developing an artist, you're helping them build that brand, and you're navigating with them what they're, sometimes I refer to it as like 4 pillars, kind of like in personal life where you might have, friends, family, relationships, career, home. An artist needs to do the same, in my opinion. They need to be able to tell their story, and they need to know what are the things that they want to communicate to fans, be it they want to show that they're an amazing songwriter. They want to show their musicianship through a certain instrument. They love gaming, so that's a massive part of what they want to do. They are really into makeup, so it's tutorials that they want to do outside of music, like personality-driven stuff. And I think when you're in the early stages, it's about working out what that really is and what's going to be tangible to put on social media, and who your fans are, where the audience is, what the regions are. There's a lot more work when you're developing an artist that you need to be able to navigate, rather than when you're kind of on the runway with a James hype and you need to be hitting some big numbers,
Okay. Very interesting. I think where I want to go now is like, your time at Ireland was 4, nearly 5 years.
Yeah.
Then obviously you kind of, that point came again where you decided you wanted another challenge.
Yeah.
You're in that other challenge now.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
I'm pretty early on in it as well, so
Yeah.
I'm always quite positive. But I think there at Ireland and at major labels in general, there are emotions that you go through, and you sort of kind of know your career path, and it is, once again, it's all about timing, because the next point for me was a head of marketing, and then you kind of go on to being a director. And I always joke with Louis, I was like, I'm coming for your job. And then I just realised that I didn't want that.
Yeah.
And I think that comes down to also having my time at Your Army. And I just started thinking to myself, I love marketing, I want to continue doing that, but how do I carry over some of the learnings that I took and the passion that I had at Your Army to start working for myself? Because I think you have to have a real hustler energy in you, and I think you also have to be disciplined to be able to do that. And I don't think everyone can do that, just like everyone can't work in a corporate structure.
Yeah.
And I just thought to myself, I'm kind of waiting. There's always like, oh, maybe I need a bit more of this, and maybe I need a bit more experience. And I'm so fortunate that I have a lot of people in the industry that have backed me and are supporting me. And as soon as I didn't actually talk to anyone about me leaving, because I thought if I talk to someone, I'm going to start getting kind of their opinion on it, and I want to just be able to decide for myself. And I don't think that from a mental health perspective it was good for me working in a corporate structure. I think that's really important, and be honest to say. It works for some people, it didn't work for me. I think it goes down to previously being a people pleaser.
Yeah.
And also saying yes to a lot of things.
Okay, well, you've dived deep into this then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now, I've done a lot of therapy for this. And I think I realised that I have to hold myself accountable to it. And be in charge of what I say yes and no to. And that's been a really empowering moment for me. Difficult, because I love Ireland.
Yeah.
The team there is so good. A lot of those people there are my best friends.
Good bunch.
So they are a really, really good bunch of people. So that was a big thing for me to do. But so far, I feel like it was the right decision. And I think Ireland being so good and, allowing me to keep on doing a couple of projects with my toe kind of still a little bit in is great. But I also loved at Your Army working with other labels and seeing how they were doing it. And you have less competition when you're outside of a major label. It is competitive in the music industry.
Yeah, totally.
In a healthy way, but also in a very non-healthy way as well, let's be honest. So now coming out of it and starting to be, talking to other labels and, starting to do a little bit of work for a couple of other companies, I feel like is once again challenging me, and I'm learning again. And I'm not afraid, if I don't know something, to say, I don't actually know what that is. Yeah. And you can tell me and you'll never have to tell me again. That's fine. I think we're all a little bit shy sometimes to just assume that we should know everything.
It's a fear-led thing though, right?
It's a fear-led thing. Yeah. And I also, I think it's a fear-led thing because the climate of what we do is changing constantly, whether we're talking about TikTok algorithms or how we're signing records or if we're spending on marketing or if we're just focusing on social media. So you've got to be on your toes and be constantly willing to learn. And I think when you're not willing to do that is when you can just sit in a job and kind of cross your arms and go, I'm fine. And I don't think I have that personality.
Very positive personality, I will say, though.
Yeah, most of the time.
Most of the time? Wait, I've never seen it the other way.
90%.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you haven't seen me at Christmas. You wait until Christmas Day with my family.
Wow, okay,
The
fine.
energy will be negative. I'm joking.
Okay, so what is it then you're doing now? You're a freelancer or a consultant. What are you?
So I've started my own agency.
Okay.
It's called AMCO, AMCO.
Okay.
And it is a marketing consultant agency. Mm-hmm. It is just me at the moment.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to be just me. I want to build a team to a certain point where I can bring in other marketeers, other people from different companies and put on a service that is predominantly marketing, whether it's creative, digital, directing. That's what I'm building. So the goal is not for it to just be me consulting on a little bit, here and there, and then going to work from my dad's in Cornwall once a week, which I probably will do occasionally. But I'm building a business out here, Dan Fisk.
Okay, amazing, and it's good to hear. And listen, I'm very confident that you'll smash it. I think you're very good at what you do, and I think you're an asset to the music industry. I think as a woman in music, I'd like to dive into this a little bit. You recently were at the Women in Music Awards.
Bingo.
You presented an award, right?
I did.
How does that happen?
I don't know how it's gone from me presenting an award to being on a podcast, because this is not my usual. This is not my usual space. I'm usually where you are, behind the scenes. So Jam Supernova has been. We've kind of risen up together through the industry, from her being at Represent and One Extra to now where she's absolutely smashing it on Six Music and has her own label, and we live around the corner from each other. So she came to the gym with me last week and looks after
gym buddies now. It's on that level.
Gym buddies now.
Wow.
And she also looks after my dog when I need dog care.
Okay.
But she's amazing, and she's once again been that person that if I ever need. She's just a calming person, and she's always given me good advice. We had a Women in Music network event before, pre-COVID, called Flex, where Jams and I used to just go out for glasses of wine all the time and complain a lot about the music industry and the expectations of being a woman and what that means. And then we just thought, let's get loads of women together to do it. So we did that for a while, which was really, really fun. She made a joke in her speech that between the two of us, we've drank all the wine in the UK, which might not be far off. And then she messaged me and she just said, do you want to present the award to me? And I said, do you not want to get one of your celebrity friends to do it? But it was actually so scary.
I was going to say, were you not very nervous doing that?
I was absolutely bricking it. And I'd only had 2 glasses of wine before, and usually at those sort of things, me and Jams would have had a bottle each.
Wow.
She was nervous as well, and I did get her partner to look over the speech before just to check he was okay with it. But yeah, it was only 2 minutes, so it was really, really quick. But I got onto the lectern, and my hands were just shaking.
I bet. How many people are there when you're doing this?
I think it's something crazy. Over 1,000. It's a big room, a big bougie room of people that I really respect and love, and all the island lot are there whooping and smiling for you, and I can just see the sugar babes are sat opposite, and you're just like, So it was terrifying, but I'm really glad I did it, and I think it's amazing that she gave me the platform to do that and speak for her as well, because it was a really inspiring night, and it was just a nice, I don't know, sometimes award shows, they might look fun, but they're not always super, super enjoyable.
Well, I mean, you'd have been to a fair few. I know you've been to a handful of the Brit Awards. I've seen all the pictures.
I have, and I've worked a lot, and I've really enjoyed working it. Yeah. I managed to last year.
When you say work it a lot, what do you mean?
Well, when you have an artist performing or you're doing red carpet. So this year.
Right.
This year, Kim Petras was performing with Sam Smith.
Okay.
Which was all kind of driven by Capital. Mm-hmm. But I was like, how do I work this event and not sit still for too long? So I kind of was there with Kim and her team and helping out, which was really, really enjoyable. So yeah, sometimes you go and it's fun. It's good for networking. It's good to meet people, but it's not. It felt different at the Music Week Awards the Women in Music Awards this year, because I just saw loads of people that I hadn't seen in a while, and there's a lot of really good conversation at the moment about equality in music. It's good conversation, but I think we're not there yet. So it was nice to just be surrounded by allies and people that, yeah, you can talk to openly.
Shall we touch on this a bit further then? When you say not there yet, what is there?
I think, well, full equality.
Yeah.
And I think whether that's, employees, employers and artists, I think there's still perceptions of what women do, particularly for artists. They've got it tough. They have got it really tough. That, obviously you make a decision when you want to be an artist to be in the public eye, but I don't think people really actually digest and take in what that means and how much you will be judged. And I think we are very quick to telling women how they look and hypersexualizing women, particularly black women as well. We have to remember that, it's across minorities that this is a massive, massive challenge. And it's it's got better, but it's definitely not there. And I think there's still moments that I see and observe and chatting to other people that work for different companies where it's, it's not, it's still a way away. But I think a lot of the challenges over the years have kind of been that it's women's jobs to fix it, but women aren't at the top yet.
Yeah.
And they are getting there and women are being hired. I mean, Natasha Mann, who used to be the MD at Universal, she now drives a diversity team there, and she's amazing. And I think it's those sort of people that you need that are in the room that are saying, actually, we shouldn't quite talk like that. Or actually, well, why are we judging, what this artist is wearing, but not what this male artist is wearing, Yeah. And it's also, it's a societal thing. We're basing our decisions of, what female artists should be and what they should do off of what society expects of us. So it is tough.
And would you say it's pretty well documented, but women getting to the top, where do you stand? Where do we stand there?
Yeah, I watched, or was it a podcast? No, I watched the government inquiry and Parliament about women in music, which they got some major label execs to do it initially, and then Annie Mac came in and they talked a lot about the live space and how Emily Evis got a lot of negative feedback on, women headliners, which I'm hearing some rumours and we feel like we might be okay next year, but who knows? Come on, Cher. So I think you can only put female artists in that space as headliners if they are willing to get there. And I think a lot of the time we look to the Americans and we go, look at Taylor, look at Beyonce, look at Ariana, look at Olivia Rodrigo breaking artists. Look at Ice Spice, arguably maybe the only like real breaking artist of the last year globally is a female. But I think that there's so many more levels that we need to build up in order to get there equally. And, platforms definitely do it a lot more. But I was kind of making this comment with someone last week. We were talking about International Women's Day, and I was like, we make such a deal out of International Women's Day, and then the rest of the year we're not as focused on, female artists, playlists, what's the 50-50. And I do think that corporations are trying it, but I don't think they're doing it quick enough or consciously enough. And I think the same, I was talking to some of the Power Up guys who run the charity, focused on bringing through, young black people as well. It's the same post George Floyd. Black Lives Matter movement was massive. People pledged to do a lot. From people that I'm speaking to as well, that's not happening as much as it should have been. So I think there's a lot of conversation of people saying they're going to do the right thing, but the action is not quite there yet. And that's not from a label perspective. That's the industry as a whole. It needs to be consciously actioned rather than saying we're going to do something, which is why I'm always quite willing to talk about it passionately.
Okay, very interesting. I think what I would like to ask you as well is if we flip it from top to bottom, a woman that wants to get into the music industry as a career, are there those same struggles at the bottom getting into the industry? And I guess what would your advice be to that person that is trying to get into the industry?
I think there's always going to be a challenge breaking in. But I think the biggest thing is just being unapologetically you. I think I spent a lot of my inception in the music industry of kind of being quietly in the corner and not wanting to give my opinion to worry about insulting people and being told that I was a bitch or I was bossy or, you know, like artists being called a diva. And actually your voice really matters and people will listen to you. So I think it's being confident to ask questions. And I've said this a lot to some of the younger staff that I've worked with, not that young, because remember, I am only 28. You know, if you're in a meeting and it is daunting and you're surrounded by 30 people, if you've got a question, ask, because most of the time you're actually our audience demographic.
Yeah.
I'm not. And, you know, the senior people that are maybe having the conversations aren't. They might have a good connection because they might have children that are kind of coming through. But I want to hear what the kind of the interns and the assistants and those that are coming through really think, because they're often the people that we're targeting our artists with.
Totally.
So demonstrate your voice. Even if you're not sure what the answer is, you don't have to always be confident and be like, I know what the answer is. Ask questions. And I don't think I asked enough questions until I grew in confidence. And now I do it probably too much.
Okay, well, is there, I tell you what, there's one other question I've got before we kind of wrap things up. Don't know how long we've been going. Nearly an hour.
Me neither. Is it what am I having for lunch?
What I want to know from you is, obviously we know what Amy Collins is looking to do next, right? In terms of the music industry, what do you think is the next big thing, right? And I want to take AI out of the equation, right? So I'm looking at trend, genre, artist. In your opinion, what do you think is the kind of next big thing in music?
I mean, when it comes to music, we're nostalgic, right? And I think now I'm in my 30s, you see all these trends come back around. You look at Flow via Island, and I mean, I just like saw Destiny's Child through and through.
Yeah.
You look at the kind of excitement around drum and bass, and you look at Chase and Status and what they're doing, and I think it's nostalgia. So whether it's garage, whether it's R&B, whether it's indie music, God, it'd be nice if that made a bit more of a comeback for people, wouldn't it? I mean, put some beats on it, guys, and I'll be down. So I think it's about looking at what was happening 15 years ago and seeing where that's going to kind of progress and develop. I mean, AI is interesting. We could talk about this,
for another podcast.
It is another podcast, but I do think the acceptance of what is used from a vocal standpoint with AI could be quite interesting in the future. I think that maybe not necessarily from a major label perspective, but potentially artists being more collaborative and open to, you know, I mean, if John Lennon can do it and the Beatles can do it, then we should be having that conversation a little bit more.
Yeah.
But what's acceptable and what's not? What's still your craft and what's art and what feels stealing? So I think it's gonna change, but it's gonna progress quite swiftly in the next 2 years. And it also depends on whether labels are gonna start opening up to it. You know, we had very strict policies on the kind of AI platforms that we could use at Universal, ones that you wanted to make sure it was like really legit ones that you could vet properly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because some artists were really open to using it. They wanted to use it for music video content, creator content, and some artists just didn't want to touch it. And I think there might be more of a middle ground found in the future.
Okay, brilliant. I actually have one more question. It's just come to me when we started talking about the kind of music that you first got you into music, I guess.
Yeah.
You mentioned noughties, R&B and hip hop.
Yeah.
If you were to pick one track, your Desert Island track in that kind of space, what would it be?
Oh, that is...
Yeah, it's a tough
one.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's because he is so much in my TikTok algorithm right now, but it came down to Usher quite quickly.
Okay.
Cannot wait for the Super Bowl. Absolutely buzzing for that. I'm going to have a Super Bowl party for Usher.
So in his archive, in his repertoire,
I think it would probably be You Remind Me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a banger, isn't it?
Yeah, That's
it was. Do you know what? It was very overplayed at the time, but obviously, when now you come back to it, you just think
it's nostalgic.
That is the key word of today, I would say.
It is, and I have this image in my head of me and my friend Becky in France with her parents holding on to our portable CD charger to make sure it didn't jump when we were in the car, and listening to Usher and just being like, you know, if her mum was driving too fast, but we'd be like, oh, like skip, and no one has those problems these days. And that was like a really good feeling. One song though, Dan Fisk, that is so hard. What would yours be?
Michael Jackson, Another Part of Me.
Woo!
You've
thought about this, haven't you?
Yeah, because I know the answer to that question. I ask it a lot, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have the answer to the question you ask.
That's true. That's why I could never do Desert Island Disc, because it's 10 tracks, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of used it as a figure of speech, Desert Island track.
But I couldn't even do that because 10, like my playlists are like 50 tracks or more. So picking one's tough. And I'll leave this and I'll be like, oh, why didn't I pick this song?
Yeah, no, totally. Amy Collins, you're such a ledge. You've done some amazing work. I think what you've got planned next, I've already said you're going to smash it. So best of luck. Thank you very much for coming down, and we'll speak very soon.
Thanks, Dan Fisk. You're a legend too, mate.